the fiction that she wrote while she was here. This is approximately between 1955, that is her published work. Her first published work, To Whom She Will, was in 1955, and the last one, Heat and Dust, was in 1975. So it's these 2 decades that I shall be covering. But then, owing to constraint of time, I shall certainly not be in a position to give you any detailed analyses of the works. I mean, the best I can do is to offer some vignettes, some glimpses, some insights into the mind of an extraordinary writer who came to India as an outsider, turned herself into an insider, and then became an outsider again. In this connection, Ruth Chawala said something very interesting, about her response to India. In an essay called Myself in India, she said, she talked about a cycle of response through which all Westerners go. And she said, first stage, tremendous enthusiasm. Everything in India is marvelous. Second stage, everything Indian not so marvelous. Third stage, everything Indian abominable. And then she says, for some people it ends there. For others, the cycle renews itself and goes on. Now, Ruth, a lot of Western writers have contradicted this. They have said that they haven't gone through this particular cycle, but there's no doubt that Ruth did. And that this cycle, or the frame of mind in which she was during these various stages, influenced her work tremendously. Now, I shall come back to that a little later, but before that, I have something else to do. You see, I need to place her in the context of the tradition of writing to which she belongs. In India, we have a tradition which we call the Indo-Anglian tradition of writing, in which Indians write in English about India. And this tradition, believe it or not, actually started in the 1850s with Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's Rajmohan's Wife. It was a novel. And Michael Madhusudhan Datta's epic poem, Captive Lady. Both these gentlemen thought that they could write in English and that they would make a mark, their work would make a mark. Unfortunately, they both bombed so badly that they never wrote in English again. They turned to the indigenous Bengali and later on became very famous, as we all know. And another strange thing is, for the next 100 years, um, no work of an Indian writer was done in English. I mean, somebody may have written something, but not of any consequence because nobody's heard of it. But again, after independence, suddenly there was an uprush of writing. R.K. Narayan, Raja Rao, Mulk Rajanand, and then later on Manohar Mulgaonkar, Nayantara Sehgal, Anita Desai. All these people started writing. And then the tradition or that kind of writing became very popular. And she says, no, how could I be? I write differently from Indian writers because my birth, background, ancestry, and traditions are different. If I must be considered anything, then let it be as one of the European writers who have written about India. Ruth Chawala starts writing after independence. She starts writing, I think, somewhere in the 50s because her first book was published in 55. And her contribution, which is a lasting contribution and an amazing contribution, which a lot of people have not even known, I think, is that for the first time in this tradition of writing, she introduces the intra-Indian context. She's actually talking about British characters, British or American, are peripheral in her early novels. It's really the Indians themselves that she's examining. Their interactions with each other. She's looking at marital dissonance, husband and wife, problems of settling down, understanding each other. That is one, like in The Householder, we have this. Then in The Nature of Passion, in Esmond in India, it's cross generational conflict. You know, the younger generation are more modern, they have different ideas. So there is clash between them and their parents. But in the ultimate analysis, what one sees is that a kind of resolution happens. What Ruth Chawala seems to be saying in this, her writing, this phase of her writing, is that Indians are basically very assimilative in nature. You know, they'll push a few boundaries, they'll pull in a little bit, there'll be some permutations, combinations, but ultimately the family won't break, the community won't break. It will still remain one solid whole. And this, she thinks, is a very valuable, I mean, she places a lot of value on this. She talks about the Indian family, and she says, for them it is enough just to be together. There are long stretches of silence, a little spurt of conversation on some commonplace everyday subject. There is no attempt at exercising the mind or testing one's wits against those of others. The pleasure lies in having other familiar people around and enjoying the air together. There is something very restful about this mode of social intercourse. It is also more adapted to the Indian climate, which invites one to be absolutely relaxed in mind and body, to do nothing, to think nothing, just to feel, to be. I have, in fact, enjoyed sitting around like this for hours on end.
Shanti and Buaji sat in their courtyard. It was late at night, and the children had one by one dropped off to sleep. Mukund, Shanti's husband, was also asleep upstairs and had been so for some hours now. But the three women still sat up as if they were waiting for or hoping for something that the day had not yet given them. They liked sitting together like this. There was not much to say, but their silence was pleasant and companionable. Shanti's youngest child was asleep in her lap, and she rocked her knee a bit up and down from time to time and murmured a snatch of a song. Buaji clicked the beads of her rosary and said God's name over and over under her breath. The night air was warm, the sky a brilliant silver from a fat, full moon. A tree out in the street reared over the top of the wall, enclosing their courtyard, and next to it was a lamp post which spilled light over one side of its leaves.
Shanti said, "What was he telling me about starting a theatre? He was so excited." Judy smiled. "He told you so?" "I was washing clothes and suddenly he came." She laughed at the recollection. How he talked, and looking at me with big, big eyes, as if it was I who was going to give him the money to start his theatre. She clasped her hands before her face and rocked herself to and fro in amusement, while the baby slept peacefully in her lap. I didn't understand anything of what he said. She ended up, and that too struck her as funny as she laughed again. "It's a new scheme," Judy said. "Poor boy," said Buaji affectionately. "Oh no," Judy said. "He enjoys it." They were all quiet on that for a while. It was true. Bal seemed to be happy most of the time, running around with his friends, making his contacts, dreaming his schemes.
This morning,
For some, it renews itself. The cycle renews itself. And I feel that with Jhabwala, it did renew itself in a slightly complicated way. It is true that she herself left. She left India and went away after writing Heat and Dust. But two of her characters, I mean, we just saw the film on the making of Heat and Dust. And I'm sure most of you have read the book or seen the film. It's about these two women who come out to India 50 years apart. One of them in the 20s, she's the wife of a ICS official, and the other one is a simple English girl who comes to find out, to discover her roots, the truth about her forefathers, the men who ruled India. And she brings with her letters and diaries, and in the process of reading what she's brought, and in the process of her writing her own experiences, her own diaries, the lives of the two women so come are revealed. The Olivia, the Mem Sahib, who came in the 20s, and this girl, of course, doesn't have a name. She's just simply, she writes in the first person, so we refer to her as the narrator. They come to the same